welcome back to episode 2.5 of Noob Edition of Ramblin' Park. We are finishing up the assembly on the carburetors. We got our jet kit, and we got a new air filter kit. Well, it's not a kit, it's a eBay special. It's used, it's a little crispy, a little crunchy, not really peanut buttery, but, you know, hey, it's a stock air filter. But we're going to do a couple of tricks on that before we strap it on the side of the bike to where we can get it breathing a little bit better too. That way it'll work better with our exhaust that we've got for this thing. So we're going to throw the jet kit in this thing real fast. Yeah, let's start it.
All right. Where do we start?
Okay, before we dive into this, there's a couple things I want to show you guys that you might want to look at grabbing to keep in the garage at the house. This PJ1 cable lube here, it's a lightweight lube that it's got just enough tack to where it'll stay in your cables and not drain out, but it's not real thick and heavy to where it doesn't give you that gummy, draggy feeling to it. Another thing is good old-fashioned silicone spray. This stuff in particular is from Motorex, and it's distributed through Parts Unlimited. You can get it at virtually any motorcycle shop. The thing that I like about this stuff is it's a little heavier, it's a little thicker. It actually stays put and does the job. And you can use this for various different things whenever you're doing carb work or other work on a motorcycle, anywhere where you need a little bit of, I'm hesitant to say lube because this is a somewhat of a family show, but anywhere where you need something to slide a little easier, hint, hint, wink, wink, if you know what I mean. Sorry, Mom. Check your local shops first, okay? Especially if you got an independent shop, kind of like the Ride Factory over in Ybor City. I'm not plugging where I work, I'll tell you that right now, but I have a lot of guys that come into me just to buy stuff to do their own work at home, and we have no problem with that. We try to help everybody out equally and fairly. We try to keep a good selection of stuff on hand. Dealerships don't do that. I'm sorry, guys, that's just the way that it is. Number one, on this Honda, these carburetors, they are side specific. The throttle cables, they attach on the left-hand side of the bike. Now, that's with you having your butt planted in the seat, that's the left-hand side of the bike. So that's the way we're going to reference all this stuff. This is where it gets strange, because on this bike, you use a slightly bigger main jet in the carburetor that feeds the rear cylinder compared to the front cylinder. The reason for that is because the rear cylinder tends to run a little bit hotter because it gets less airflow. Even though it's a liquid-cooled bike, air is still a cooling medium here. They split the jetting, so to speak, to where they run the rear cylinder a little bit richer. That way it doesn't run hotter than the front cylinder. It keeps everything in balance like that. But you want to make sure that your parts are going in the right carburetor, because if you screw up and you put the main jets flip-flopped, you're going to be pulling your hair out wondering why the thing don't run worth a crap and why it falls on its face anytime you give it more than half throttle. This is going to be a little difficult to film, but I'm trying to show you the difference between a stock needle, which is in the bottom of the view right now, and the jet kit needle, which is the silver one up on top. The biggest differences that you're going to notice right off the bat is our stock needle has a fixed head here, and basically it just looks like a nail. Our jet kit needle has multiple grooves here where you can put a C-clip on it, and what that does, that changes the installed height of this needle in the slide. Also, if you notice, the stock needle is quite a bit more blunt, especially down here towards the tip. Our jet kit needle is both smaller and it has a more aggressive taper profile from about 2/3 of the way down towards the tip. And the reason they do that is because as the slide lifts, that's going to make the fueling curve more aggressive due to higher engine load or higher engine RPM. Typically, whenever the slide is at a higher amount of lift, that's a pretty good indication that you're either running at high throttle load or high RPM or both. It needs more fuel flow in those areas. Doing your initial needle install, your jet kit's going to have a guideline that shows you what main jets they recommend and also what clip position on this needle they recommend the C-clip or E-clip, depending on your terminology. That's going to give you a good baseline to get your install done and get you up and running. Now, that's not etched in stone. You got a lot of variables here, depending on whether you've got a stock air filter, a high flow air filter such as a K&N or a Uni, your exhaust that you have, whether you have baffles in your exhaust, whether you've got short straights, very minimal back pressure, if any. You got a lot of things that you got to take into consideration. Treat the instructions in your jet kit as more of a guideline rather than an absolute rule. In this case, our instructions call for the E-clip to be installed in the second groove down from the top of the needle. I know it's going to be very difficult for you guys to see. They specify that that C-clip is supposed to go in that second groove down from the top. We're going to put it in the third groove down from the top to ever so slightly raise that needle up a little bit higher on its installed height. That way we can take advantage of the modifications that we're going to do to the stock airbox that we bought to put back on this bike. Now this part's a little fiddly, and it's easy to put one of these little itty-bitty C-clips in orbit. This is a little trick that'll keep you from having to chase that sucker down in the garage for the next 4 hours. Take it, put it in whatever groove that you want to install it in. Don't try to mash it in with your fingers, because that's going to hurt. Hold it with your fingers like this and lay it on a shop rag, and then with the open end of the E-clip facing up, push the needle down on top of it until you feel it click into place. That way you can keep control of it and it doesn't go sproing and go somewhere else at a high rate of speed. Okay, additionally on this particular model, this jet kit requires you to drill out the lift holes in the carb slides. Honestly, I'm not that big of a fan of it, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do. Now, the lift holes in these slides, it's not the big hole here in the middle. It's the one that's off to the side here, right there. That's the one that you got to drill. And you got to make very, very, very exceptionally sure that you are using the correct drill bit that comes in your jet kit, because they're going to give you two of them. One of them is for drilling the anti-tamper caps out of the idle mixture screws to where you can adjust those to your baseline settings. We've already removed these, so we don't have to worry about that. In this case, the big 5/32 drill bit that they give you with this jet kit, it's going to go away. That way I don't have to worry about it accidentally sneaking up on me when I'm not looking for it. The drill bit that they give you for drilling these lift holes and the slides on this is a number 42 wire gauge drill bit. It's not a high quality fancy drill bit, okay? They buy these things by the thousands. Take it slow. Realistically, you're going to drill 2 holes with this thing and you're never going to use it again, okay? Take your slide, turn it upside down on a flat surface like this to where you can maintain control over it, and just drill it nice, steady, and straight. And you can see, we ain't making that big of a hole. We're opening up the hole that was there already probably by about 15, 20 thousandths of an inch, if that. I don't know how well that's going to show up on camera, but the slide that we've already drilled the lift hole in, it's this guy right here. So you can tell it's not a very big change, but it is a big enough change where it'll make a difference with how the bike runs. Okay, now they give you a little thin flat washer, and that's supposed to go on top of the E-clip that you put on your jet needle. That gives that spring, that little bitty spring on the needle retainer that I warned you guys likes to run away. That gives that spring something to push against. Take it and pinch it between your fingers, hold the slide upright, and get it started in there. And then just help it come straight down in there, just like that. All right, so we got our jet needle back in the slide, and we got the retainer in there and got it locked in place. Let's put it back in the carb. Now on these slides, they do have a very small index ring on the slide that meets up with the body of the carburetor, because that is a vacuum port that's got to be sealed there. So make sure you get that in the right place. Now, I like to leave the diaphragm on the slide tulip down like that. That way it will lay in that groove on the top of the carburetor body and hold itself in place. Plus, it makes it easier getting the spring and the slide cap in place later on. That way you're not trying to corral 4 different things. It's trying to go in 6 different directions at once. So while you're leaving that slide tulipped up like that, put your finger inside the carb bore, and then you can put your spring in there, and look, I'm pushing down on it, and it's not going anywhere because I'm holding that slide and keeping it from moving down into the carburetor with my fingers. Now we just take our carb cap And keep in mind, it's got a little index notch in it that lines up with that vacuum port that I was telling you about. Spring is springy. I got to chase it a little. Slinky, slinky. Now you can get your screws started in, and if it's easier on you, just do half of them. Just make sure that they're across from one another to where it holds the cap down evenly, and you can just run them down until they bottom out. You can let go of it, free up both your hands, grab your screwdriver, and tighten the rest of them up. Again, do not go ape shit with these things. Just normal snug, run them down until they bottom out, and then just give them a little to snug them, and that's it. Stop there. And there, half our carbs put together. Notice I said half. This ain't my bike. That's his bike. He's going to put the rest of this crap together because I'm going to go make me a sandwich. I'm hungry. Number 106 jet. That goes in the emulsion tube. Basically, I just run them down until they bottom out, and then I just give them just a little light twist just to seat them and get them to lock into place. Now, that bowl O-ring is molded to the contour of that float bowl. Now, there may be times that it doesn't exactly lay in there and fit, and you need something to stick it in place. A little dab of Vaseline works wonders. Just smear a little bit in the groove and then push your O-ring into place, and it'll hold it there for you. I've seen guys use super glue and stuff before. Super glue is no bueno, man. I mean, I would not use that at all, ever. Once it's there, it's there. And you never know. We may need to go back into these things. Take that, lay it on there. Now, if you notice, hang on, let me lift that up. You notice here and on that other bolt hole there, it's got that small raised area that goes in the bolt hole. Yeah. It's kind of like a dowel pin that locates it in place. So make sure that you've got those in there. And what I like to do is drop that in there and make sure that your gap all the way around the carb body where the float bowl meets it is fairly even. That will give you a visual reference to let you know that that float bowl O-ring hasn't squirmed out of the groove and it's where it's supposed to be. Because if it comes out of that groove and you tighten the float bowl screws up on that thing, it's going to act like a guillotine and it's going to cut that sucker. Here's your screws over here, the longer ones. It's got the lock washers on there. Run them in there, tighten them up. I'll run them down just to where they bottom out. And while I'm doing that, I'll keep my thumb on the float bowl with one hand just to hold it in place. That way I don't bump it and the O-ring accidentally fall out on me. Wait, whoa. Time saver bumpkin tip. You know the screwdriver bit that you had here? Yep. Take that. Use it like a baby shorty abbreviated screwdriver and spin that stuff in there. The more you know. You're going to use a normal screwdriver, you know, like human size. I mean, that's about your sister size, but, you know, that just gets it down and, you know, gets everything locked in place. Good old Harbor Freight screwdriver with the Kung Fu flipping grip. There we go. All right, now let me see how tight you got these. Hold that carb for me since I'm working with one hand right now. Yeah, you're pretty good, man. I mean, basically all you're shooting for is if they've got a lock washer on them like these do, you want to compress that lock washer all the way and then just give it a little nudge past the bottomed out point to where you can make sure that you got a little bit of preload on it and you're good to go. Here's your other needle. All right. Grab that little guy out of there, and it's kind of fiddly. Now, I want you to hold that thing up and look at it. See the notches in there for the E-clip groove? You're going to count down from the top. The top of the needle, you know, the end where the clip goes, the very top of that is always going to be your first position. And we're going 3 notches down from the top, counting the top as 1. We're going 3 notches instead of 2, like the directions say, because we're modifying our air box as well. Here's how you keep a hold of that thing and don't shoot it into orbit. Put it in your notch and make sure you're in your 3rd notch, but don't try to press it in with your hand. It's kind of fiddly. It's kind of hard to see. And lay that down on this towel we've got laid out on the bench top here with the open end facing up. You're not trying to push the clip onto the needle. You're trying to push the needle down into the saddle of the clip. And there you go. There we go. That little snick tells you that you're good to go. I'm going to play Terminex right now from all the flying insects out here in the garage. I see a little guy. He's wiggling around right down there. I hope it was a slow death, you bastard. Take your needle And before you start dropping it in that slide, this little flat washer here, right, that has to sit on top of the E-clip when the needle is down in the slide body. Now, if you put that needle in there and you just let it go and drop in there, when it hits the bottom, what's going to happen?
Washer's going to bounce off.
Exactly. So here's how you get around that. Hold the slide to where you can put one of your fingers underneath the hole that the needle is going to come through. Trade hands. Just follow the needle down out at the bottom of the slide, just like that.
There we go.
There you go. All right, now next up, you got to drop your needle retainer in there. Be careful, that little spring likes to go on walkabout. Aggravating, isn't it? It's kind of like putting a diaper on an octopus. No pressure or nothing, you know. I mean, we've been standing here for 5 minutes now. Do 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 do. Miss you, Alex. Show ain't the same without you, man. Much love. Put your Phillips screwdriver and the Phillips on that needle retainer, push it straight down, and rotate it to where the tabs lock in. Once it's centered, it will line up and go down in there. Oh, sorry. I had a bee crawling on the back of my neck, and I just body slammed him John Cena style right there on top of the bench. Poor little guy. I'm sorry, dude. Don't take it personal, okay? Trust me. I love your tribe, and I appreciate everything that you guys do for us here on this little mud ball called Earth. That thing ain't giving you no love, is it?
Nope.
All right. Here. This is where we call in Dad. Okay, teaching time. Let's take all the parts, dump them back out. Let's start over from ground zero, okay? And it goes in there right like so. Ah, you little bastard, you just popped off on me. Got a game with the ball on a string and a cup and all that. Yeah, I wasn't worth a shit at that either. Yeah, I cheated. I used the nuclear option. I grabbed a pair of needle nose. So sue me. Push and twist, and oh, looky there. It locks in nice and easy. Well, I left my forceps at work.
Yeah.
Yes, I own them for legitimate mechanical reasons, okay? Don't read nothing into this, y'all. Go back and check and make sure that your diaphragm's down in its groove like it's supposed to. Make sure that little index notch here lines up, because there is a vacuum passage right there. And if that thing's off just a little bit, it's not going to seal right. Take one finger, put it up inside, and feel up, and you'll feel the bottom of that slide. Don't push up on it, but push down just a little. See how you can hold that?
Yep.
All right, now take your spring and drop it in there. Notice the little notch for the vacuum passage?
Yep.
That lines up in there just like so.
But it was right.
You're good. Sometimes they'll bounce around. All right, now, hold the cap down with your thumb. Let go of the slide with your finger. We are in teaching mode right now, and that's what we're doing. Now, before you put that screw right there, I want to point something out to you. See that shiny spot?
Yep.
Something used to be there, didn't it?
Oh, right.
That little fold-over tab. Now is the time to put that in place. That way we don't have to go back and undo it to redo it later on. And then get the one on the back, and then we can tighten it up, and then we're done.
Wait, if that one goes there, where's this one go?
That one goes on the other carb cap.
And you forgot to do it?
No, I didn't forget to do it. I left it off on purpose.
What's the purpose?
The purpose is because that way I can point out bare spots to you and stuff like that, and then I can be like, hey, this is a roadmap to how this carburetor came apart. Something this shape went here, and I want you to figure out what it is. It's meant to make your brain work a little bit. Now, let's check our slides. Just reach in there with your finger, lift it up, hold the carb up to where you can look down inside the bore of the carb while you're doing that. Now, keep in mind, think of how these carbs install on the bike. Reach in there, lift your slide up, make sure it moves and falls all the way back down to its resting point, and pay attention to how slowly that slide comes down on its own. Do the same thing to its buddy and make sure it falls at the same rate. The reason that I point that out and the reason I check that, if you've got one slide that kind of looks like it's falling in slow motion somewhat, and then the other slide falls real quick, you know, just kind of falls down with a kind of a sharp click to it, or just bloop, almost in free fall, that tells you that your diaphragm is not in the groove and that it's pinched somewhere because it's not forming a vacuum. We're about to the point where we're going to set this aside, clear off the lift, roll the bike up here. We got a coolant leak that we got to deal with, and we're going to show you guys the blood and guts details on that, but I'm not going to force everybody to sit here and watch the next 4 or 5 hours, however long it takes us to get this done, because Is it going to take us 4 or 5 hours? No, it's not. But the thing is, we're juggling around a camera. We're having to figure out what to say to where we don't sound like a bunch of completely unintelligent boobs. When we get to the point where we're dealing with the blood and guts on the coolant leak on this bike in particular, we'll come back. We'll point that out to you, show you the process and how you fix that. But for the rest of it, we're probably going to put this on a time lapse, and that way we can overlay some Benny Hill music or something like that, just where it looks, kind of cool and funny and shit. Told you guys that I was going to show you what the fix is for the coolant leak on this thing, on this little connecting pipe in between the cylinders. And if you look close, you can see it right there, okay? Now, all that is just a little aluminum pipe, and it's got 2 clips that hold it in, and then it's got an O-ring on each side that seals it. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull those clips out of there. Then we're going to finagle that pipe out of there to where we can slide it over to one side, use a pick to peel the O-ring off and put a new O-ring on, then slide it back this way to where we can do the same thing with its buddy, line it back up, put the clips back in, boom, our leak is fixed. And it beats the hell out of having to pull the motor out of this thing like Honda tells you to do in their service manual. So first thing we got to do here is we got to get the coolant, what may be left in the motor, out of the motor. And pretty much any liquid cooled bike, if you look on the bottom side of the water pump, where you find that on the side of the block, there's going to be a bolt with a copper washer on it. That's your drain bolt. Now, you don't want to just pull that thing all the way out, because if you do, it's going to pee a solid stream halfway across your garage and make for one hell of a puddle, and then you got to clean all that crap up. The trick is, break it loose, and then take the radiator cap off before you take that bolt all the way out, because the coolant will creep around the threads, and that way, yeah, it may take a little longer to drain, but it goes in the pan where you want it to go without making a huge mess everywhere else.
If it has any coolant in it.
It's got some in it. I've seen it leaking. And since we're leaking up there, anything below this, it's not going to leak out. So you got a drip coming right there. Now pay attention to what that stream does whenever I pop the radiator cap open.
Well, it's gotten faster as a drip.
Yep. But it's a controlled drip. That way it's not shooting shit everywhere across the shop. See, you can just let it run at a trickle like that and let it drain out. That way you can keep it contained and you don't have a big old mess you got to clean up. Okay, so while that's doing its thing, we're going to take these 2 clips off on that coolant pipe. Ugh. That one was stuck in there pretty good. How about its buddy? Time for pliers. Oh, wow. Hang on, before I pull that off, let me grab the camera here. I wanted you guys to see this. That is the second of those 2 clips that I was talking about. And watch this. I went to pulling on it with a pair of pliers to try to remove it. That whole pipe is just all but spinning free. I mean, I can spin that thing around all day long, man, and I haven't even gotten the clip off of it yet. So what that's telling me, those O-rings are dried up, they're drawn up, they've lost all their pliability, plus they're hard as a damn rock. It ain't going to be hard at all getting this thing out of here. A lot of times on these, I have to fight with them, but this ain't going to be one of them times. So while that's doing its thing, we're going to do a little bit of basic maintenance while we're here, and we're going to go ahead and pull the cables loose, and we're going to shoot some lube down them just to where we can slick them up and, get all the spiders and corrosion and whatever else may be living in there. See how you got a split in that cable adjuster?
Yep.
And you got a split in the lock nut? If you run that all the way in and line those splits up, you don't have to take the lever off to get that cable out, but you're not going to be able to just pull on it and get it out. Grab a hold of it, get a good grip on it, pull the lever, and then pull the cable out.
What?
You're pulling tension on the cable housing, and as you let go of the lever, you're still holding tension on the cable. So you're just pulling it that way to give you enough room to slip it out of the slot. We're going to take a shop rag, preferably a icky, nasty one. Yep, you volunteer to distribute. See where this cable attaches down here on the side of the motor?
Yep.
Okay, take an old greasy shop rag, something that you use for wiping crap up off the floor, whatever. Paper towel, don't care. Just don't use your good bath towels on this because you may or may not live to regret it. Just put that right there like that. Then come over here. So we got our cable out, and we got our little cable lubing gizmo here. Then you tighten down the little thumb screws on it, and what that does is it squeezes that rubber sleeve down around the cable on the inside of that clamp fixture where it forms a seal. A lot of times when you do this, it'll spray out of that split right there. So I take a rag and I wrap around it just where I can kind of contain the mess to where I don't wind up with it coming back and hitting me in the face. What that does is that seals off the cable to where it pressurizes the housing and it shoots the lube down the housing down to the other end where it's going to do the most good.
Oh, hear it coming. Oh, that's a lot of gray. Like a lot of gray.
Yep. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll shoot a little bit of brake cleaner down in there and then take it out of the cable luber, work it back and forth like that just to help knock loose all the junk, and then blow some more brake clean through it to kind of flush it out. And then I throw cable lube in on top of it. See, I got the barrel of the cable back up in the lever. And you see how that'll stretch over here, but it doesn't come all the way out here to go into the adjuster.
Same but reverse?
Right. Grab it here, pull the lever, then you grab and you pull, and it goes right back in. Let me grab you guys and show this to you, because a lot of y'all may not know this. Whenever you're servicing the cables on any motorcycle that uses a threaded in adjuster like this, they're always going to have a little split here to allow the cable to pass in and get it in and out of there. Whenever you're adjusting, say, a clutch cable, that's a little too tight right there. Right there. The free play in it, you're looking at that gap right there. And the free play that you feel, you want it to be about the thickness of a nickel. Because as the motor heats up and everything grows, you're going to lose some of that free play. Now, if you don't have any free play there when it's cold and the motor heats up, it's going to have the same effect as if you were riding around town with one finger putting pressure on the clutch lever, and eventually your clutch is going to start slipping. Also, bumpkin tip here, that split that's in the cable adjuster right there, that'll act like a funnel for rainwater. So whenever you make your adjustment, make sure you turn that thing to where it's pointed down towards the ground or fairly close to it, because if you don't, whenever the bike, if you get caught out in the rain on your bike, or if the bike's sitting out in the weather, if you don't park it in a garage, water will hit here and it'll hit that cable and it'll act like a candle wick and it'll run all the way down that cable, and then it rusts and it washes out all the lube, and that's how cables die. Honda gonna Honda. On Honda factory throttle cables, you really got to work at it to screw that lock nut off the very end of the adjuster, because whenever they make these things, they dink the threads there at the very bottom of the cable adjuster to keep the nut from spinning all the way off if it vibrates loose. So whenever you go to service your cables, you can force those nuts past that, but it's going to be kind of a pain in the butt to get it back up over that when you go to thread the lock nut back in place. So what I do is I screw them all the way up, because I got to have a certain amount of real estate right here for my cable luber to set over the end of this cable fitting to where it can form a seal. Honda does it as a fail-safe, if you will. See, we got a little bit of drip coming out.
Yep.
That's when you know you got lube all the way up through the cable. Now, yeah, that's going to drip for a little bit. And yeah, it's going to make a little bit of a mess, so you might want to wrap a rag around it or put a rag down on the floor wherever the drip's dripping at. But you're better off to do it that way, because you're blowing that stuff from the bottom up to the top. Because once you take your cable luber off here, whatever excess lube is in that cable housing, it's going to drain down and it's going to drip out of this end too. Oh, hello.
You got a hitchhiker.
I got a tag along. Well, he flew away, so I didn't wing him that bad. Son of a bitch.
Came back for a
Go it.
vengeance.
Go. I ain't playing. If it comes down to it, I'll blowtorch his ass. See what I was talking about? How that's running down that cable from up high and it's dripping off?
Yep.
See, it's carrying some of that funk down out of the cable too. What lube the cable doesn't need, it's going to drain out just from gravity and capillary action. I'm going to leave that rag off. See why I put the rag around it now?
Yep.
Because that crap sprays everywhere. The rag is more to keep me clean than it is to keep the bike clean. Also, as a side benefit, that little bit of lube that's coming into that cable or that throttle housing up on the handlebar,
right?
A little bit of that is going to run down inside the throttle tube on the grip and the handlebar itself. That way it lubes that up and, you know, it doesn't get sticky, crunchy there too. If you're an impatient guy like me, you can take a tactical piece of cardboard and make you a little deflector for the ensuing geyser of coolant that is going to happen whenever you finally get tired of waiting on it and you take that bolt completely out. Ah! Somebody's done this before.
What, your method?
It's not exclusive to me, and honestly, it ain't this hard to figure out, but we throw a little light on here. You guys notice something about that O-ring? It's green. That is a air conditioning O-ring, and I've used those in the past. However, the big problem here is when they used one that was too small. So it stretched too much and it doesn't fit the cavity that it's supposed to go in the way it should.
How much you want to bet it's on the other side too?
Oh, I'm sure it is. It would be absolutely senseless to do one side and not do the other. Yeah, that O-ring's still soft and pliable. They just got dumb and they used the wrong size O-ring.
Now, what are we doing here? Are we just replacing the O-rings?
Yep, that's all you got to do. Need a little more girth.
Oh, Dan's got a little bit of antifreeze in him now.
I'll get over it. I know this is a metric sized O-ring, but for some reason I was thinking I was using a imperial sized O-ring. So it's kind of a back and forth trade-off. Now I can't move that fitting anymore because it's hitting the inside of the cylinder on this side.
So what's our solution there?
You work with what you got in front of you. You see that little bit of gap?
Yep.
We're going to use that. Put a little silicone on it. You take one pick, you dangle the O-ring in the gap. You take your other pick and use that to get the O-ring to follow around in the groove. And there's your O-ring. Now you spray that down with silicone real well. You got to go all the way in like what we were here just now, because you've got to be able to slip it out to expose the other end of that connecting pipe. Take some needle nose vice grips and you bias it off to one side. You don't want to clamp down stupid tight with these because that pipe is aluminum. It can be deformed and damaged. But you clamp it on enough to get a hold of it, you start putting pressure on it and twisting it back and forth, and it lets that O-ring conform to the groove and it'll slip into the cylinder. I do these all the time with the carbs in place. It's a lot easier and a lot less fiddly to do it while you got the carbs out. At the end of the day, this was a budgetary decision based on a recommendation by an engineer in a cubicle somewhere. And there we have it. Leaks resolved. Okay, guys, right about this time, it was getting kind of late in the night, and me and my son, we'd worked a full day at the ride factory, and honestly, we were kind of in that zone where we were just cruising along, and things were getting random all over the place, and we were jumping around and talking about anything from random daily bullshit to quantum physics and everything in between. And I really didn't feel the need to bore you guys with the humdrum of the simple act of replacing a fuel pump and running some fuel hoses. And to be perfectly honest with you, that would have made a long video that much longer. So that's why I decided to go ahead and run this stuff as a fast forward time lapse. What you're seeing right now is 50 times normal speed. And, you know, some people in the audience, they may think, damn, he makes a mean cup of coffee. I do. There's no doubt about that, but it ain't that good. You know, it's not the Pablo Escobar version, let's put it that way. So, like I said, me and my son, we spent a little time just hanging out in the garage, just normal father-son chit-chat bullshit. You know, I called him on some of his bullshit, he called me on some of my bullshit, and at the end of the night, we had a good damn time. Now, we got to the point where we were getting to pop this thing off and get it running, and we run into a little bit of a snag on it. And I didn't want to work too late on it because I've got neighbors around me and it was about 1 o'clock in the morning. So I decided at this point we needed to call it a night and pick it up the next day. So that's what we decided to do. Oh, damn it. Excuse me, folks. I'd like to take a couple minutes just to throw a big shout out to my buddy Jared over at Weems Motor Co. semi-shameless plug for his channel over there. Jared's a hell of a dude, and he's one awesome fabricator. The man has a skill set and a way with working with metal on old English stuff that most people would have condemned to the graveyard many, many years ago. He built some really awesome stuff out of his shop over there, and I got to honestly say, Jared, and seeing what Jared can do in a fairly small space, similar to what I've got here in the temple, Jared was a big inspiration behind these videos and getting my stuff set up over here at the house. That way I could do things over here. You know, me and Jared, we kind of do our own thing. He does him, I'm going to do me. But at the end of the day, I'm proud to call him a brother, and he's he's my kind of weird, man. Oh, and in case y'all were wondering, this here, yes, this is Happy Happy Anti-Murder Adulting Juice. This is not only a coping tool, it is a social lubricant, and it will be your best friend in your darkest days. So last night when we got this thing up and running and got it popped off, it was only idling on one cylinder, but whenever we rev it out, it'd kind of rev out okay, and the other cylinder would come back in.
Right.
All right. I didn't like the way that felt. I went ahead and I threw the gauges on there just to see if the carbs were just wildly out of sync, and I hadn't caught it whenever I was doing the final assembly on the carbs before we put them on there. The carbs were pretty close as far as the balance on them, so that ruled that out. And then I got to digging a little deeper. I could back that idle mixture screw out, and I could drool a little bit of carburetor cleaner around the screw to where the vacuum would pull it in, and all of a sudden, boom, I'd pick that cylinder back up. So I knew we had a fueling problem. It wasn't pulling fuel in on that cylinder on the idle circuit, but it was fueling, you know, once the RPMs had come up to where it could start metering off the needle. So I thought, okay, we've got a blockage. Pulled the idle mix screw out, which is a little sketchy considering that they're horizontal now instead of being up and down. But I was able to dig the little bastard out of there, and that's where things got interesting. Idle mix screw, right? Okay, new part out of the kit.
Looks bent.
Exactly. Now, watch when I turn this. And don't worry, folks, I'm going to show you guys here in just a second. Right now, we are in teaching mode. See how when I turn that, the tip of that is kind of,
Yeah.
Okay. Now, I don't know if by chance this came out of the package like this, because honestly, I can't recall 100% looking at both of them and saying, yep, that's straight. And even if I did, it's probably something where I've done it enough times where I was kind of halfway on autopilot at that time and I didn't catch it. But if you look real close at the end of that, see how that's kind of smushed down a little bit? Looks like it got crashed into something. Yeah. I couldn't find any debris in that passage. There's nothing in there that it could have hit. And the way that passage is machined in that carburetor, it's got a taper that leads that needle into where it seats at because that's how it meters fuel. I'm wondering if we just happened to get a shitty screw out of the package that I didn't catch because it's bent. With it being all jacked up like that, it's going to either run a huge amount of fuel through there to the point where it's going to not idle because it's just pig rich, or it's not going to pass any fuel because it was mashing the screw off to one side and it wasn't allowing the O-ring to seal, and it was sucking enough air around it that it just basically it was short-circuiting the idle circuit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this old screw here. Remember, don't ever throw your old parts away, kids. That shit's important. I'm going to take this old screw and I'm going to put it back in the carb, and we're going to see what happens here. Before I do that, I'm going to show you guys what I'm talking about here. I just got to figure out a good way to do it. Ah, to hell with it. We're just going to wing it. So here we've got our two different idle screws. Obviously, the darker of the two on the left side is the old one that we pulled out. Here we've got our two idle mixture screws. And the darker one on the left-hand side, that's obviously our old one that we pulled out. The bright, shiny, brand spanking new one on the right. If you guys look real close, sucker's bent, man. We're going to clean this old one off and reassemble it and throw it back in there, and then we're going to see what this thing does. And I'm going to keep that little bastard for evidence for later on, because I've still got the other needle that I can put up there to compare it to. it doesn't feel like there's anything that the tip of that needle's crashing into that's going to damage it or anything like that. So it's 3 full turns out from seated. Decent enough starting point. Let's put our sink adapter back in there. If I'm having to work on carbs while I've got the hoses hooked up to it, these things are real delicate. I always take them out. That way I don't accidentally slip and bump them and break them. Plugs in that front cylinder are probably loaded up right now. Still only idling on the rear cylinder. Hear that little sag and then it comes in. Right there where the throttle plate meets up with those transition holes. It's picking up fuel from the transition holes, so I know it's metering there. So we're 3 turns out. Run this in and see if we hear any change at all. Honestly, I'm not expecting to, though. Yeah, nothing. Okay. About the only other option here is that port from the screw, from the metering tip of the screw going into the throat of the carb. We've got an obstruction or a piece of trash or something that's found its way into there. Imagine that. I'm figuring out how to work my own shit on the fly here. Take the handle from a hammer. See how it's just crawling on out of there? Yeah. That's because you're shaking the carb body side by side from tapping on it with the hammer, and that screw's floating free. So it's just kind of and it's just walking on out the hole to where you can get to the little guy. There's no damage on this. There's no deformation or anything. Whatever was in there maybe squished down in the bottom of that passage. It either came out when I gave it a blast carb clean and we've got a blockage there, or it's still in there. Swap out our augmented straw for a standard straw because every now and then you just need a little more length in things. Non-augmented straw. Now what I'm doing is I'm feeling for where that straw lands in the center of that passage. See how we're not getting a whole lot of carb clean out of there? That's how you know it's sealed up, because if you weren't in that metering hole in the body of the carburetor itself, when you shot a little carb clean in there, most of it would just blow right back out at you. I got very little out of it, but I can hear it hissing and moving around. So that tells me it's either going into the intake runner, it's back feeding into the carb body and going back through the pilot jet, which is a good thing because this way we can make sure we don't have an obstruction there or in that passage, or it's coming out the idle mixture discharge hole to where it, the fuel naturally wants to go to feed the cylinder. One more time with the carb clean just to make double damn sure. Put it back together, cross your fingers, and hope like hell we got whatever was in there out of there. There's always time for lubricant. Just to let you guys know that 3 turns out from being bottomed out on the idle mixture screw, that's what Dynajet states in their instructions they give you with the jet kit. Most of the time you'll be okay with that. I use that as a starting point. That way I can make small adjustments to where I can get the idle quality dialed in to where we've got the best idle possible. And at the end of the day, basically that whole 3 turns thing, it's more of a guideline than a rule. Let's see what happens. Hey! And it went away again. Well, that doesn't get us anywhere. Hey, look at that. There's no damage on that needle tip. I'm kind of leaning at this point more towards a chunk of something that broke loose further upstream and is plugging up our pilot jet. And I know that our pilot jets were clean and clear whenever I put this thing together.
When we put this together?
True. I know we had flow through there, and I know we had flow through the passages in the carb body. So we're dealing with foreign material in the carb somewhere.
Does that mean we're going to have to take it all out?
Yeah. All right, so here's where we are. Apparently, something snuck in somewhere when we wasn't looking, and we got a little tiny piece of trash in the idle circuit on the carburetor that goes to the front cylinder on the n00b Honda here. So what that means long term, we got to pull the carbs back off, break them back down again, and see what we missed and fix our fuck up. But instead of making you fine folk wait through that painful and agonizing process, we're going to wrap things up right here where we are. We're going to get this thing blown apart, and then we're going to get down to whatever it is that's causing the problem. We're going to fix it. We're going to put it back on, and then we're going to have a running motorcycle. Because the good news is we did get it running well enough to know that it's not fixing to puke its guts out all over the... Hey, you got a blob of peanut butter right there. Do I? You do, yeah. Okay. Kids, damn. I mean, 20 plus years and counting, and we're still working on this shit? Come on now. The next episode of this, you guys are going to see a running and riding capable motorcycle. Whether we're actually riding it or not, that's another story, because we still got a bunch of other stuff to do, some body work. We got to put some turn signals on this thing. We got a whole lot of rust we got to scrub off of it. We do know that we don't have anything to be concerned with about the engine mechanically, because we got it popped off and running, and we ran it long enough to know that the bike's not overheating. We resolved the coolant leak that we had in this. The coolant fan's coming on like it's supposed to. And most importantly, we don't have any death rattles or anything going on inside the motor that sounds like the pistons are trying to swap holes with their neighbor. Yeah, that's always a plus. I'm sorry, folks. You know, this is one of those times where I always tell you people straight up that I'm going to share with you my successes and my failures. And guess what? This was a big-ass goose egg. I'm not going to call it an out-and-out failure. It's just a kink in the road, if you will. Because every now and then, you got to back up and approach something a little bit differently.
Well, this is some bullshit.
I got to put that shit together in my head. So anyway, y'all, until next time, I love you. I hope you learned something. Hope you had a few laughs here and there. If you're not already on the Patreon, stop by, check us out. Doesn't cost you one damn dime to stop in and visit and say hey with us, and you meet some pretty cool people and share some pretty interesting points of view. Next week, we may or may not have a bit of an update on Barnacle Boy, the Daddy Dirt / Tetanus Express / whatever funky bullshit name that we can come up with it between now and then. Also be on the lookout for a new tooltip video from the temple. Look forward to seeing y'all in the comments, and I will catch you guys on the flip side, all right? This sucks. It's not a good feeling. Don't like it, don't care for it. Honestly, not too proud about it. But I ain't one for giving up. I'm too damn hard-headed to quit. So I figured I needed to get up off my ass and do something about it. Because at the end of the day, that motorcycle, that's for my son. And I'll tell you right now, you don't ever give up on your kids. After a little bit of tweaking and a little bit of encouraging, it finally decided to see things my way. That's good, too, because I swing a big damn hammer. And I wasn't about to walk away from this thing feeling like something kicked my ass. That works for me. This is for the people out there that's run into a brick wall before. When it happens, it happens. How you back up and react to that, that's what dictates where you go moving forward from that point. Don't ever quit. Don't ever stop learning. Don't ever quit trying.